The stagecoach rolled away from the homestead with Felicity Garrison still sitting in the back, her carpetbag clutched tightly in her lap, as dust settled around her like a shroud of shame. At 28 years old, she had traveled 3 weeks from Ohio to meet her mail-order groom in Aurora, Nevada, only to be deemed too old the moment he laid eyes on her. The man had taken one look at her face, noted the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, and declared he wanted a younger wife who could give him many years of childbearing. He had paid for her return journey without even inviting her inside his house. The September sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden bench where she sat, her traveling dress already covered in the red dust that seemed to coat everything in this silver mining town. Felicity watched the stagecoach disappear down the rutted road, taking with it her last shred of dignity and her ticket back to a life she had desperately tried to escape. She had no money for lodging, no prospects, and nowhere to go except back to Ohio, where her sister's husband had made it clear she was no longer welcome under their roof. A shadow fell across her lap, and she looked up to find a tall man standing before her, his weathered hat tilted back enough that she could see his face. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of creek water in summer, green with flecks of brown. A bandana hung loosely around his neck, and his shirt was rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. "Madam, I could not help but notice that fellow who just left here. Was that Samuel Jenkins?" His voice was deep and carried a warmth that seemed at odds with the harsh landscape surrounding them. Felicity nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She would not cry in front of this stranger, no matter how kind his eyes seemed. Thought so. "I recognize that fancy buggy he keeps polished like a mirror. He is about as shallow as a rain puddle in July." The man crouched down so he was at eye level with her, balancing easily on the balls of his feet. "Name is Wade Vaughn. I've got a ranch about 5 miles north of here. Raises horses mostly, some cattle. Been looking for a wife myself for about 3 years now, but every time I go through those letters the matchmaker sends, they all seem too young. Girls barely 18 who do not know the first thing about real life or real work." Felicity stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Sir, I do not understand." Wade Vaughn smiled, and it transformed his entire face, crinkling the corners of his eyes in a way that made him seem approachable despite his rugged appearance. "What I am trying to say, madam, is that if you are not already spoken for, I would very much like to make you an offer. I saw Jenkins turn you away, and I heard him say something about age. But from where I am standing, you look exactly like what I have been hoping to find. A woman with some years on her, someone who knows her own mind and has lived enough life to know what matters." "I am 28, Felicity said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Jenkins said I was too old to give him the large family he wanted. Well, Mr. Jenkins is a fool." Wade stood and extended his hand to help her up. "I am 32 myself, and I have got no interest in a girl young enough to be my daughter. I want a partner, someone I can talk to at the end of the day, someone who understands that life out here is hard work and needs a steady hand." "You look like someone who has got steady hands." Felicity took his hand and let him help her to her feet. Her legs felt shaky beneath her, whether from the long journey or this sudden turn of events, she could not say. "Mr. Vaughn, you do not know anything about me. For all you know, I could be a terrible cook or have a sharp tongue or any number of faults." "Could be," he agreed easily. "And you do not know anything about me either. I might snore like a freight train or forget to wipe my boots at the door. But I have got a good ranch, I pay my debts, and I have never raised a hand to a woman or child in my life. I can promise you respect and honesty, and I think that is a better foundation than most marriages start with." He picked up her carpetbag as though it weighed nothing. "What do you say we head into town proper, get you a room at the boarding house for a few days, and give you time to decide? No pressure, no obligations. Just a chance to see if we might suit each other." The practical part of Felicity's mind screamed that this was madness, that she should demand passage back to Ohio immediately and figure out some other solution to her problems. But the rest of her, the part that had been slowly dying under her brother-in-law's dismissive comments and her sister's pitying looks, the part that had gathered every penny she could save and answered that advertisement for a mail-order bride in Nevada, that part whispered that perhaps this was exactly what she had been hoping for all along. "I can cook well enough," she heard herself say, "and I can sew and keep accounts. I managed my late father's dry goods store for 6 years before he passed." Wade's smile widened. "That is more business experience than I have got. I am better with horses than I am with ledgers." "Sounds like we might complement each other pretty well." He gestured toward the main street of Aurora. "Come on, then. Let me at least buy you a decent meal before you decide whether I am crazy or not." The town of Aurora sprawled along the lower slopes of the hills, a jumble of wooden buildings and canvas tents that spoke to the silver boom still drawing prospectors and entrepreneurs to Nevada territory. Felicity had read that Aurora sat right on the border between Nevada and California, though recent surveys had confirmed it fell just within Nevada's boundaries. The main street bustled with activity despite the afternoon heat. Miners emerging from the tunnels that honeycombed the hills, freight wagons hauling supplies, and the constant ring of hammers as new structures went up seemingly overnight. Wade led her to a restaurant with whitewashed walls and red checkered curtains in the windows. Inside, the air was mercifully cooler, and the smell of fresh bread made Felicity's stomach growl audibly. She realized she had not eaten since early that morning, too nervous about meeting her intended husband to do more than nibble at some dried beef. They settled at a table near the back, and Wade ordered them both the special: roast chicken with potatoes and carrots, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. While they waited, he told her about his ranch, the Triple V, named for his father Victor Vaughn, who had established it 15 years ago before dying of pneumonia one harsh winter. "I was 17 when Pa died," Wade said, turning his coffee cup between his calloused hands. "My mother had passed when I was just a boy, so it was just me and him for most of my growing up. He taught me everything about horses, about reading the weather and the land, about treating people fair. The ranch was not much when he started, just a small plot and a dozen horses, but he built it into something real. When he died, I promised myself I would keep building it, make it into something even bigger. But a ranch that size needs more than one person. I have got 2 hired hands, good men both, but what I need is a true partner." Felicity listened carefully, watching his face as he spoke. She had learned over the years to judge a man's character not by his words, but by the way he treated people he considered beneath him. When their food arrived, brought by a young Chinese woman, Wade thanked her with genuine warmth and asked after her father, who apparently ran the laundry next door. The woman smiled shyly and assured him her father was recovering well from his recent illness. "You are friends with the Chinese families here?" Felicity asked after the woman had left. Wade looked surprised by the question. "Sure. They are good people, work harder than most white folks I know. Old Mr. Chen, he does the best laundry west of the Mississippi, and his daughter Ming, she is learning English fast and helps him keep the books." Why would I not be friendly? It was the right answer, spoken with such simple honesty that Felicity felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. In Ohio, her brother-in-law had been vocal in his prejudices against anyone who was not exactly like him. She had hated listening to his tirades at dinner, hated the way he spoke about people, as though they were less than human simply because of where they were born or what they looked like. "No reason," she said softly. "It speaks well of you, is all." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Wade asked, "What about you? What made you decide to come all the way out here?" Felicity set down her fork and considered how much to tell him. She had learned that honesty, while painful, was usually the best policy in the long run. "My father died 2 years ago. He left the store to me and my sister jointly, but her husband convinced her to sell it. He said it was not proper for women to run a business. They gave me a room in their house, but it was made clear every day that I was a burden. When I turned 28 last month, my brother-in-law sat me down and told me I was too old to make a decent marriage back home, that I should consider myself lucky they had let me stay as long as they had." Wade's jaw tightened and his eyes went hard. "Sounds like your brother-in-law is another one of those fool men who cannot recognize value when it is standing right in front of him." "I saw the advertisement for mail-order brides," Felicity continued. "It seemed like a chance to start fresh, to build a life where I could be useful instead of just tolerated. Mr. Jenkins seemed pleasant enough in his letters. He said he wanted a mature woman who could help him run his ranch. I should have known better when he kept asking about my age and whether I looked younger or older than my years. Jenkins has got a reputation for caring more about appearances than substance," Wade said. "His ranch is mortgaged to the hilt because he spends more money on fancy clothes and that buggy than he does on good breeding stock. Within 5 years, he will be bankrupt, mark my words. You had a narrow escape there, even if it does not feel like it right now." The food was excellent, and Felicity found herself eating more than she had in weeks. There was something about Wade Vaughn's straightforward manner that put her at ease. He did not seem to be performing or trying to impress her with exaggerations. He simply told her about his life, his ranch, his hopes for the future, and then listened with genuine interest when she told him about growing up above her father's store, about learning to do sums before she could properly read, about the satisfaction of a well-organized stockroom and customers who returned because they trusted her recommendations. After the meal, Wade walked her down the street to a neat boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. He paid for 3 nights in advance before Felicity could protest, then stepped back and tipped his hat. "You take these few days to rest up from your journey and think things over," he said. "I will come by tomorrow afternoon if that suits you and we can talk more, but there is no pressure, Miss Garrison. If you decide you would rather head back to Ohio or try your luck elsewhere, I will make sure you have the funds to do so. I will not have it said that Wade Vaughn took advantage of a woman in a difficult situation." He left before she could form a response, striding back down the street with a loose-limbed grace that spoke of a life spent outdoors. Felicity stood on the boarding house porch, her carpetbag at her feet, and felt the first genuine spark of hope she had experienced in months. Mrs. Patterson showed her to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor, with a window that overlooked the street and a bed with a real feather mattress. After the widow left, Felicity sank onto the bed and finally let herself cry. But these were not the bitter tears of humiliation she had expected. Instead, they were tears of release, of tension draining away, of allowing herself to believe that perhaps her story was not over after all. She washed her face in the basin, changed into a fresh dress, and then sat by the window watching the town move through its daily rhythms. Aurora was smaller than she had expected but busier. with a raw energy that came from being a place where fortunes could be made or lost on the strike of a pickaxe. Men outnumbered women significantly, she noticed, and most of the women she saw were either clearly working women of questionable reputation or the well-dressed wives of successful miners or businessmen. That evening, Mrs. Patterson invited her to join the family for supper, and Felicity found herself at a table with the widow, her two teenage sons, and an older gentleman who rented a room on the ground floor. The conversation was lively, full of gossip about the mines and speculation about whether the silver veins would hold out or play out like they had in some other Nevada towns. "You are the woman who got turned away by Samuel Jenkins," Mrs. Patterson said bluntly over the apple pie. "Whole town is talking about it. That man has got more pride than sense. My late husband always said Jenkins was the type who would rather look rich than be rich." Felicity felt her cheeks flush, but the widow's tone was sympathetic rather than cruel. "I am afraid so. It seems I was not what he was expecting." "Well, his loss is our gain," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "I saw Wade Vaughn walking you down the street earlier. Now there is a man worth knowing. He has been running that ranch of his since he was barely more than a boy, and he has built it into one of the finest operations in the county. Does not owe a penny to anyone, treats his workers fair, and he's got a good head on his shoulders. If he has taken an interest in you, you could do far worse." The older gentleman, Mr. Hendricks, nodded agreement. "Wade Vaughn is solid as they come. His father was the same way. Good people, the Vaughns. They see past surface things to what matters underneath." That night, lying in the comfortable bed listening to the sounds of the town settling in for the night, Felicity found herself thinking about Wade's words. "You're exactly the age I have been waiting for." No man had ever said anything like that to her. Back in Ohio, she had received a few half-hearted proposals from older widowers looking for someone to care for their children or keep their house, men who made it clear she should be grateful for their attention despite her advancing years. But Wade had looked at her as though her age was an asset rather than a liability, as though the experiences that had shaped her were valuable rather than shameful. She drifted off to sleep with the first real smile she had worn in months. Wade arrived the next afternoon as promised, freshly shaved and wearing what were clearly his town clothes: clean trousers, a pressed shirt, and a vest that looked hardly worn. He carried a small bouquet of wildflowers that he presented to her with an almost boyish shyness that was endearing. "Picked these on the way into town," he said. "Figured they might brighten up your room some." They walked through Aurora together, and Wade showed her the town's landmarks: the courthouse that had witnessed heated debates about whether Aurora belonged to California or Nevada, the various saloons and gambling halls that catered to the miners, the general store with its impressive array of goods shipped in from San Francisco, and the small church where a traveling preacher held services twice a month. "It is not a gentle town," Wade admitted as they paused to watch a freight wagon being unloaded. "Mining towns never are. There is drinking and gambling and occasional fights, and the law is sometimes more of a suggestion than a rule. But there are good people here too, families trying to build something lasting. The mines will not last forever, but the ranches will. The land will still be here long after the silver is gone." They ended up at the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land, looking out over the rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and juniper. In the distance, mountains rose against the impossibly blue sky, their peaks still holding patches of snow despite the September warmth. "The ranch is that direction," Wade said, pointing northwest. "About an hour's ride on horseback, maybe 90 minutes by wagon. It is far enough from town to feel private but close enough to make supply runs reasonable. We have got a good water source, a creek that runs year-round, and enough grazing land for the horses and a decent-sized cattle herd. Felicity shaded her eyes against the sun, trying to imagine what his ranch looked like. How many horses do you raise? Got about 40 breeding horses right now. Mixture of Mustangs caught wild and broken proper, and some better stock I have purchased over the years from California. I specialize in working horses, the kind that ranchers and farmers need, not fancy show animals. They have got to be tough and smart and willing. I sell maybe 15 to 20 horses a year, plus some cattle when the price is right. He glanced at her. It is a good living, steady, not going to make us rich, but we would never go hungry. What would you expect from a wife? Felicity asked directly. I need to know what I would be agreeing to. Wade appreciated her forthrightness. Fair question. I would expect you to run the household, which is not much right now, just a 4-room house and a vegetable garden that needs better tending than I have given it. Cooking for me and the 2 hired hands, though they have got their own bunkhouse and mostly take care of themselves. Help with the ranch accounts, since you have got experience with that, and I am slower than I should be with figures. Maybe eventually help with the gentler horses, the ones that need a soft hand. And children, she forced herself to ask. I know I am 28, but I am not too old to have children if that is what you want. Wade was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the land. I will be honest with you, Miss Garrison. I would like children someday if we are blessed with them. But I am not looking for a broodmare. If we have 1 child or 6 or none at all, I will not love you any less. What I want most is a true partner, someone who is building this life with me, not just living in the house I built. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense. It made so much sense that Felicity felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Yes, she managed. That makes sense. I know this is fast, Wade continued. We have only known each other a day, but out here people often do not have the luxury of long courtships. I am not asking you to decide right this minute. Take your time at the boarding house, get to know the town a bit, ask people about me. Mrs. Patterson will tell you the honest truth, good and bad. I have got my faults like any man. I can be stubborn, and I get too focused on work sometimes and forget about other things. But I will treat you right, Miss Garrison. That is a promise I can make and keep. They walked back toward the boarding house as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. At the porch, Wade tipped his hat again in that courteous gesture that was becoming familiar. I will come by tomorrow if you would like, and we can talk some more. Or if you have decided against it, you can send word through Mrs. Patterson, and I will arrange for your travel funds with no hard feelings. Come by tomorrow, Felicity heard herself say. Please, I would like to see you again. His face lit up with such genuine pleasure that she knew in that moment that she had already made her decision. But wisdom suggested she take the time he was offering, make sure this was not just desperation pushing her toward a choice she would regret. That evening, she helped Mrs. Patterson with the supper dishes and asked carefully casual questions about Wade Vaughn. The widow was happy to share what she knew. He has been ranching on his own since his father died about 15 years back, Mrs. Patterson said, her hands deep in soapy water. Some folks thought he would fail, being so young, but he proved them wrong. He is fair but firm with his hired men, pays them on time, and does not ask them to do anything he would not do himself. I have never heard of him getting drunk and causing trouble, though he will have a beer or 2 at the saloon sometimes. Goes to church when the preacher is in town, helps his neighbors when they need it. What about women? Felicity asked, trying to sound casual. Has he courted anyone seriously? There was a girl a few years back, banker's daughter from California. Pretty little thing, barely 20. Wade seemed taken with her at first, but it fell apart after a few months. I heard she wanted him to sell the ranch and move to San Francisco where she could have a proper social life. He refused and she left. Mrs. Patterson handed Felicity a wet plate to dry. Since then, he has been more careful. I think he realized he needed someone who wanted the life he has built, not someone who wanted to change him into something different. Over the next 2 days, Felicity gathered more information about Wade Vaughn from various townspeople. The picture that emerged was consistent. A hard-working, honest man who kept his word and treated people fairly regardless of their station in life. No one had a bad word to say about him, except that he could be a bit too serious sometimes, too focused on his work. Wade visited her each afternoon and they talked for hours. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to break horses from his father, about the first winter he survived alone after his father died, and how he had almost given up when a blizzard killed half his herd. She told him about her mother dying when she was young, about essentially raising herself while her father focused on the store, about the satisfaction of building something successful, and the heartbreak of watching it sold off, because a man decided she was not capable of running it herself. On the third day, Wade asked, "Have you thought about what you want to do?" They were sitting on a bench outside the general store, watching the afternoon stage arrive in a cloud of dust. Felicity had thought of little else. She could return to Ohio, throw herself on her sister's mercy, and endure her brother-in-law's condescension. She could try to find work in Aurora, though options for respectable single women were limited. She could travel to another town, try to start fresh somewhere else. Or she could take a chance on this man who looked at her as though she was exactly what he needed. "I want to see the ranch," she said finally. "I want to see where you live, how you live, and then I will give you my answer." Wade smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes in that way she had come to anticipate. "Fair enough. How about tomorrow morning? I will bring the wagon and we can spend the day there. I will bring you back to town before dark so everything stays proper." The next morning dawned clear and warm, though there was a hint of autumn crispness in the air that promised cooler weather ahead. Wade arrived with a well-maintained wagon pulled by 2 sturdy horses. He helped Felicity up onto the bench seat, and they set off north from Aurora with the sun at their backs. The ride took them through countryside that grew more beautiful with each passing mile. The scrubby land near town gave way to rolling hills covered with wild grasses and dotted with sage and juniper. They followed a rough track that Wade said he had helped establish years ago, winding through small valleys and across ridges that offered sweeping views of the surrounding landscape. Wade pointed out landmarks as they went. The place where a mountain lion had once stalked his cattle until he managed to scare it off, the grove of cottonwood trees where he sometimes camped in summer when working the far pastures, the neighbor's ranch boundary marked by a distinctive rock formation. "That is the Hendricks place," he said, gesturing to the east. "James Hendricks and his wife Sarah, good people. They have got 3 kids and Sarah has been after me for years to find a wife so she has another woman to talk to. She's going to be thrilled when I tell her about you." After about 90 minutes, they crested a small rise, and Wade pulled the horses to a stop. "There," he said softly. "That is the Triple V." Felicity looked down into a shallow valley and felt her breath catch. A creek wound through the middle of the valley, lined with cottonwood trees that were just beginning to turn gold. On a slight rise above the creek sat a house, not large but solidly built, with a covered porch across the front and a stone chimney rising from one end. Behind it stood a good-sized barn, several corrals, and a smaller building that was probably the bunkhouse Wade had mentioned. Horses grazed in the pastures, and she could see cattle dotting the hillsides beyond. It was not a grand estate or a fancy ranch, but it looked like a home, a real home, built with care and maintained with pride. Felicity felt something shift inside her chest, a feeling she had not experienced since her father died. It felt like possibility. Wade drove them down into the valley, and as they got closer, Felicity could see the details. The garden beside the house that was indeed struggling without proper attention, the neat stack of firewood under a shelter, the tools hung carefully in their places, the general sense of order and purpose that spoke to Wade's character as clearly as any words could. Two men emerged from the barn as they pulled up, both younger than Wade and clearly ranch hands. Wade introduced them as Tom Kirby and Henry Mills, and both men removed their hats and greeted Felicity with shy politeness. "Miss Garrison might be staying on as the boss lady," Wade told them, and both men brightened visibly. "That would be real good, boss," Tom said. "No offense, but your cooking is terrible," Wade laughed. "None taken. It is terrible. I know it is terrible. You both know it is terrible. That is why we are all so skinny." He helped Felicity down from the wagon and showed her around the ranch. The barn was well organized, with stalls for the horses and storage for tack and feed. The horses themselves were beautiful, ranging from sturdy Mustangs to more refined animals that showed careful breeding. Wade introduced her to his favorites, and she could see the genuine affection he had for these animals. They trusted him, came to him readily, and responded to his quiet commands with willing obedience. The house was simpler inside than she had expected, but not uncomfortable. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a good iron stove, a sturdy table, and some basic furniture that looked handmade. Two bedrooms opened off the main room, one clearly Wade's and the other apparently used for storage. A fourth room was what Wade called his office, though it was barely more than a small desk and some shelves holding account books and ranch records. "I know it is not fancy," Wade said, watching her take it all in, "but it is solid. The roof does not leak, the stove works well, and there is room to add on if needed." Felicity walked slowly through the house, noting the details. The floors were clean if unpolished. The windows had real glass, not just oil paper. The dishes were basic but adequate. The whole place had the feel of a man doing his best but clearly missing a woman's touch. She paused at the window overlooking the creek. "It is a good house," she said softly. "A very good house." Wade came to stand beside her, not too close but near enough that she was aware of his presence. "I built the addition on the back myself, the office and the second bedroom. Pa originally built just 2 rooms, but I wanted space to grow into. I always figured when I had a family, I would need more room." "Tell me truly," Felicity said, turning to face him. "Why did you really approach me that day? I cannot believe it was just because Jenkins turned me away. You must have seen plenty of women come and go through Aurora." Wade met her eyes steadily. "I will tell you the truth, even though it might sound strange. I was in town picking up supplies, and I saw Jenkins take one look at you and start shaking his head before you even got off the stage. I saw your face, saw the way you held yourself together even though you had to be devastated. And I thought, there is a strong woman. There is someone who has faced hard things and kept going. That is what I need, not a girl who will fold the first time things get difficult." He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. "And then when I got closer and saw your face, really saw you, I thought you were beautiful. Not pretty like those young girls with their smooth faces and silly giggles. Beautiful in a way that comes from living life and surviving it. I've got no use for fragile things, Miss Garrison. I need someone strong, someone real. And that is what I saw when I looked at you." Felicity felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I am strong," she said quietly. "I have had to be. But I am also tired, Mr. Vaughn. I am tired of fighting for respect, tired of being told I am not good enough because I have lived too many years or have opinions or want more from life than to be tolerated. If I stay here, if I marry you, I need to know that I will be a true partner like you said. Not just a housekeeper you share a bed with. You will be my partner in everything," Wade said firmly. "I will ask your opinion on ranch decisions. The money we make will be ours, not mine. Any children we have will be raised by both of us. And I will never, ever make you feel like you are only here because I need someone to cook and clean. I need you for a whole lot more than that." She studied his face, looking for any sign of insincerity, but found only earnest honesty. "All right," she said. "Then my answer is yes. I will marry you, Wade Vaughn." His face transformed with a smile so bright it seemed to light up the dim interior of the house. "You mean it. You are sure." "I am sure." And she was. For the first time in years, she was absolutely certain she was making the right choice. Wade reached out and took her hands in his, calloused and warm and strong. "I will make you happy, Felicity. I swear I will spend every day trying to make you happy." They were married a week later by the traveling preacher in Aurora's small church, with Mrs. Patterson and her sons as witnesses along with Tom and Henry from the ranch. Felicity wore the best dress she owned, a deep blue silk she had saved for special occasions, and Wade wore a new suit he had purchased for the occasion from the general store. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. When the preacher asked if Wade would honor and cherish Felicity, he answered in a strong, clear voice that carried conviction. When he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, his hands were steady. And when he kissed her at the preacher's instruction, it was brief and chaste, but filled with promise. After the ceremony, Mrs. Patterson hosted a small celebration dinner at the boarding house. Several townspeople stopped by to offer congratulations, including Mr. Chen from the laundry, who presented them with a beautiful embroidered tablecloth as a wedding gift. Wade accepted it with thanks and admiration, complimenting the fine work, and Felicity loved him a little more for his easy grace with people. They rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon, the wagon loaded with Felicity's few possessions and the wedding gifts they had received. The September sun cast long shadows across the valley as they descended toward the house. Tom and Henry had made themselves scarce, leaving the house to the newlyweds, and Felicity felt her stomach flutter with nervous anticipation as Wade helped her down from the wagon. He carried her bags inside, setting them in what was now their bedroom. The bed was freshly made with new linens, another gift from Mrs. Patterson, and someone had put wildflowers in a jar on the small dresser. "Henry's idea," Wade said when he saw her notice them. "He is a romantic at heart, though he would deny it." They stood in the bedroom, suddenly awkward with each other. All the easy conversation of the past week seemed to have deserted them. Finally, Wade cleared his throat. "I want you to know, Felicity, that I have expectations for tonight, but I am not going to push you. We can take things as slow as you need." Felicity felt a rush of gratitude for his consideration. "I have not," she began, then stopped, unsure how to phrase it delicately. "That is to say, I do not have experience with marital relations." "Neither do I," Wade admitted. "Not the way you mean. I have not been a saint, but I have never been with a woman I cared about before. So we will figure it out together, and we have got all the time in the world." The honesty between them eased some of the tension. That night, they came together with tenderness and patience, learning each other slowly. Wade was gentle, checking often that she was all right, And Felicity discovered that intimacy with the right person could be something beautiful rather than the frightening ordeal she had sometimes imagined. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Wade's arm around her and the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night, Felicity felt a peace she had not known in years. This was home, not the place, though she already loved the ranch with its creek and its horses and its view of the mountains. But this feeling of being wanted, of being valued, of being exactly where she was supposed to be. "Are you happy?" Wade asked quietly. "I am," she said, and meant it completely. The next weeks fell into a rhythm as Felicity settled into her new life. She woke before dawn with Wade, made breakfast for him and the hired hands, then set about learning the rhythms of the ranch. There was always work to be done: washing, mending, cooking, tending the garden, preserving food for the winter ahead. But it was satisfying work, and more importantly, it was appreciated. Tom and Henry treated her with respectful friendliness, grateful for her cooking and the small touches she brought to their daily lives, like mending their clothes without being asked and baking extra bread, so they always had fresh supplies in the bunkhouse. Wade consulted her on decisions large and small, from which horses to sell and which to keep for breeding, to whether they should invest in more cattle or focus on expanding the horse operation. She took over the ranch accounts and discovered that Wade had been undercharging for his horses. When she showed him the market prices from San Francisco and Sacramento, he was shocked at the difference. "I did not want to seem like I was cheating anyone," he explained. "You are not cheating anyone by charging fair market value," she countered. "You are providing quality animals. People will pay for quality. Besides, if we are going to expand like you want, we need the capital to invest." They compromised on prices that were fair but reflected the true value of Wade's well-trained horses, and their income increased noticeably. Felicity felt a deep satisfaction in contributing to the ranch's success in tangible ways. As autumn deepened and the cottonwoods turned bright gold, Wade began teaching Felicity to ride. She had been on horses before, but never with any real skill. Wade was a patient teacher, starting her on a gentle mare named Daisy and gradually building her confidence. Soon she was riding out with him to check on the herds, learning to read the land and the animals the way he did. One October afternoon, they rode up to a high meadow where some of the horses were grazing. The aspens were brilliant gold against the blue sky, and the air held the crisp scent of snow that would come soon. Wade pulled his horse up beside a huge boulder and dismounted, helping Felicity down. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," he said, gesturing to the view that spread out below them. "You can see the whole valley from here, all the way to the mountains in every direction." Felicity turned slowly, taking in the vista. She could see their house, small in the distance, and the silver thread of the creek winding through the valley. Beyond it, the land rolled away in shades of gold and brown and green, bounded by mountains that were already snow-capped. "It is beautiful," she breathed. Wade came to stand behind her, his arms circling her waist. She leaned back against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart against her back. In the months since their wedding, they had grown comfortable with each other, the initial awkwardness giving way to a deep intimacy that was both physical and emotional. "I love you," Wade said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "I know we married fast and practical-like, but somewhere along the way, it became a whole lot more than that for me. You are not just my partner or my wife. You are the person I want to see first thing in the morning and last thing at night. You are the one I want to share everything with, the good and the bad. I love you, Felicity." She turned in his arms, looking up into his face. His eyes were serious, vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "I love you too," she said. I think I started falling in love with you that first day when you told me I was exactly the age you had been waiting for. You saw me, Wade, really saw me, when everyone else just saw a woman past her prime. How could I not love you for that?" He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, losing herself in the feel of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "We should head back before we do something scandalous up here on this mountain," he said with a laugh. "Would that be so terrible?" she teased, emboldened by love and desire. "Not terrible at all," he agreed. "But I would rather take my time with you in our own bed, where we do not have to worry about the horses wandering off." They rode back to the ranch holding hands as much as the horses would allow, and that night they made love with a passion and tenderness that left them both breathless and satisfied. Winter came to the Nevada high country with its usual fierce beauty. The first heavy snow fell in late November, blanketing the valley in white and turning the ranch into something from a fairy tale. Wade and the hands worked long hours ensuring the animals were sheltered and fed, and Felicity kept the stove burning and hot food ready whenever they came in from the cold. It was during those long winter evenings, sitting by the fire while wind howled outside, that Felicity and Wade talked about everything and nothing. He told her more about his childhood, about his mother who had been a schoolteacher before marrying his father, about learning to read from her before she died. She told him about growing up essentially alone, about teaching herself business by trial and error, about the dreams she had let die when her father passed. "You could still teach if you wanted," Wade said one evening. "I heard the town is trying to get a proper school started. They have been holding classes in the church, but they need a real teacher." Felicity considered it. "Maybe someday. Right now, I am happy here, learning to run a ranch and be your wife. But perhaps in a few years, when we have things more settled, I could teach part-time." Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly with just the four of them: Wade, Felicity, Tom, and Henry. Felicity cooked a feast with a goose Wade had hunted, and she made pies and cakes from her carefully hoarded supplies. Wade gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal, and she gave him a new pocket watch to replace the old one that had belonged to his father and was wearing out. On Christmas night, after Tom and Henry had retired to the bunkhouse full of good food and the whiskey Wade had shared, Felicity told Wade the news she had been holding since earlier that week. "I think I am with child," she said quietly, watching his face in the firelight. "I am not completely certain yet, but all the signs are there." Wade went very still, his eyes searching hers. "Are you sure? How do you feel? Are you well?" She laughed at his sudden rush of questions. "I am fine. Just a bit queasy in the mornings, and I am late with my courses." "It is early yet, but I am fairly certain." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "A baby," he whispered. "We are going to have a baby. Are you pleased?" she asked, though his reaction made it clear he was. "Pleased does not even begin to cover it," he said, pulling back to look at her face. "You have made me happier than I ever thought possible, Felicity. First by agreeing to marry me, and now this. I feel like the luckiest man in Nevada territory." The winter passed slowly, and as Felicity's pregnancy became more obvious, Wade became increasingly protective. He insisted she rest more, that she not lift anything heavy, that she let him take over more of the household tasks. Felicity bore his hovering with amused patience, knowing it came from love rather than a desire to restrict her. In February, they made the trip to Aurora so a doctor could examine her. Dr. Morrison confirmed what Felicity already knew. She was healthy and pregnant, with the baby expected to arrive in late July or early August. "Your wife is in excellent health, Mr. Vaughn," the doctor said. I see no reason to expect any complications. She is a strong woman, and 28 is hardly too old to bear children despite what some people might tell you. Women have healthy babies well into their 40s. Wade squeezed Felicity's hand, and she saw the relief in his eyes. She realized he had been more worried than he let on, probably remembering his own mother's death in childbirth. Spring arrived late but spectacular, with wildflowers carpeting the valley in waves of color. Felicity's belly grew round, and she found herself slowing down despite her desire to keep working at her usual pace. Wade hired a woman from town, a widow named Sarah Johnson, to come help with the heavier household work and to be there for the birth when the time came. Sarah was a practical woman in her 50s who had raised 6 children of her own. She took charge of the household with cheerful efficiency, and Felicity was grateful for her presence even if it meant admitting she needed help. As summer approached and Felicity grew larger, Wade would sit with her in the evenings, his hand on her belly feeling the baby kick. "Strong little one," he would murmur, "takes after your mother." Or stubborn like his father, she would counter, and they would laugh together. In late July, on a hot afternoon when the cicadas were singing in the cottonwoods, Felicity's labor began. Sarah sent Tom racing to town for Dr. Morrison while she and Wade helped Felicity into bed. Henry was dispatched to inform the Hendricks family, as Sarah Hendricks had promised to come help with the birth. The labor was long and hard, lasting through the night and into the next day. Wade refused to leave her side despite Sarah and the doctor's suggestions that he wait elsewhere. He held her hand, wiped her face with cool cloths, and murmured encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her pregnant in the first place. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, their son was born. He came into the world red-faced and screaming, with a shock of dark hair and his father's strong features. "A boy," Dr. Morrison announced, placing the cleaned and wrapped baby in Felicity's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Wade looked down at his son with wonder, tears streaming down his face unashamedly. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Felicity, he is perfect." They named him Victor Wade Vaughn after Wade's father and himself. Little Victor was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Wade was an involved father from the start, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor with his son when he fussed in the evenings. The months after Victor's birth were exhausting but filled with joy. Felicity marveled at how much love she could feel for this tiny person who had not existed a year ago. Wade seemed equally besotted, spending every free moment with his son, showing him the horses and the land that would someday be his. As Victor grew from infant to baby to toddler, the ranch prospered. Wade's reputation for quality horses spread, and they had buyers coming from as far away as California and Oregon. Felicity managed the business side, negotiating contracts and handling the finances with the skill she had learned in her father's store. Together, they made the Triple V into one of the most successful ranches in the region. When Victor was 2, Felicity discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter, Helen Margaret Vaughn, was born on a crisp October morning, arriving faster than her brother and with far less fuss. Wade cried again when he held his daughter, this tiny perfect creature with her mother's delicate features and a surprisingly loud cry. "Another blessing," he said. "How did I get so blessed?" Life settled into a rich, full rhythm. Victor grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, already showing Wade's way with horses. Helen was quieter, content to sit with her mother and watch the world, but with a stubborn streak that made Felicity laugh. When Victor was 4 and Helen was 2, they hired additional help as the ranch continued to expand. Tom and Henry had been joined by 2 more hands, and the bunkhouse had been expanded to accommodate them. The main house had been added onto as well, with a proper parlor and 2 more bedrooms, 1 for each child. Felicity did eventually start teaching, holding classes twice a week in the ranch house for the children of nearby families. She had 8 pupils ranging in age from 5 to 12, and she loved the work of shaping young minds. Wade built her a small schoolroom as an anniversary gift, and she decorated it with maps and books and all the tools of learning. Years passed in a blur of work and love and life. Victor and Helen were joined by another daughter, Emma, born when Felicity was 33. Emma was the most spirited of the 3, with her father's determination and her mother's quick mind. The house rang with laughter and occasional squabbles, and Felicity sometimes could barely remember the quiet, lonely woman who had sat on that bench in Aurora so many years ago, rejected and alone. One evening, when Victor was 8, Helen was 6, and Emma was 2, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. Victor was practicing his reading, Helen was drawing pictures in the dust with a stick, and Emma was contentedly chewing on a wooden horse Wade had carved for her. "You remember that first day?" Felicity asked Wade quietly. "When you came up to me at Jenkins' place?" Wade smiled, the expression crinkling his eyes in the way that still made her heart flutter. "Every detail. You were sitting there trying so hard to be brave, and I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen." "I thought you were crazy," she admitted. "Some stranger offering to marry me when you knew nothing about me. Best crazy decision I ever made." He reached over and took her hand, their fingers lacing together with the ease of long practice. "You were exactly the age I had been waiting for, Felicity. Not too young, not too old. Just exactly right." She leaned her head against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of horse and leather and the soap he used. "I was so angry when Jenkins rejected me. I thought my life was over, that I had nothing left to hope for. I never imagined that the worst day of my life would lead to the best. Funny how life works sometimes," Wade said. "All the things that seem like disasters at the time turn out to be blessings in disguise." Victor looked up from his book. "Papa, what are you and Mama talking about?" "Just how lucky we are," Wade said, pulling his son close with his free arm. "How lucky I am to have a smart, hard-working wife and 3 perfect children and the best ranch in Nevada territory." "I think we are lucky too," Victor said seriously. "Tommy Hendricks says his pa is mean when he drinks, but you are never mean, Papa." Wade met Felicity's eyes over their son's head, and she saw the emotion there. "I try hard never to be mean," Wade said. "Because you 3 and your mama are the most important things in my whole life, and I want you to always know you are loved." Helen abandoned her drawing and climbed into Felicity's lap. "Tell us the story again, Mama, about how you and Papa met." It had become the children's favorite story, the romantic tale of how their parents had found each other. Felicity began the tale, editing it slightly for young ears, telling how she had come to Aurora looking for a new life and how their father had seen her and known immediately that she was the one he had been waiting for. "Like a fairy tale," Helen sighed when the story was done. "Better than a fairy tale," Wade said, "because it is real, and we all get to live happily ever after together." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky and the children grew sleepy, Felicity reflected on how profoundly her life had changed. At 28, she had thought herself too old for love, too old for dreams, too old for anything except a quiet life of service to others. But Wade had seen her differently. He had seen her strength, her capability, her worth. He had seen her exactly as she was and decided she was exactly what he needed. They had built a life together that was richer than anything she could have imagined. The ranch thrived under their combined efforts. Their children were healthy and happy, growing up surrounded by love and purpose. The community respected them both, and their partnership was held up as an example of what marriage could be when two people truly worked together. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Wade and Felicity lay in their bed talking quietly. This had been their habit from the beginning, these late-night conversations where they shared their thoughts and dreams and worries. "I have been thinking we should add some sheep to the operation," Wade said. "Not a huge flock, but enough to diversify a bit. Wool prices are good, and sheep do well on land that is too rough for cattle." "That makes sense," Felicity agreed. "We would need to hire someone who knows sheep, though. Neither of us has experience with them." "There is a fellow over in California, comes recommended by James Hendricks. Basque Shepherd, knows his business. I thought I might write to him, see if he is interested in coming to work for us." They discussed the details, working through the logistics and finances the way they did with all major decisions. This was what Felicity loved most about their marriage. The way Wade valued her input, the way they made choices together, the way neither of them pulled rank or dismissed the other's concerns. Eventually, the conversation drifted to more personal matters. "Victor is going to need more advanced schooling soon," Felicity said. "What I can teach him is good for now, but if he is going to take over the ranch someday, he will need mathematics and science beyond what I know." "There is that academy in Sacramento," Wade suggested. "We could send him there when he is 12 or 13, bring him home for summers." "That is several years away yet," Felicity said. "But yes, we should start planning for it. And Helen is so bright, Wade. She should have opportunities too, not just Victor." "All our children will have opportunities," Wade promised. "Every one of them will get an education and a chance to make their own choices about their lives. If Victor wants to run the ranch, that is wonderful. If he wants to do something else, that is fine too. Same with the girls. They will not be forced into anything." It was this attitude, this respect for individuals and their choices, that made Wade such a good father and husband. He believed in letting people be who they were meant to be rather than forcing them into predetermined roles. As the years continued to pass, the Triple V grew and prospered. Victor proved to have his father's skill with horses, and by the time he was 12, he was breaking and training young horses alongside Wade. He did go to the academy in Sacramento, returning each summer more educated and worldly, but still fundamentally the same solid, dependable boy he had always been. Helen surprised them all by showing an aptitude for medicine. After helping Sarah Johnson nurse a cowhand through a serious injury when she was 10, Helen declared she wanted to be a doctor. Wade and Felicity supported her dream, even though it was unusual for women to pursue medicine. They sent her to a women's medical college in San Francisco when she was 18, and she thrived there. Emma, the youngest, inherited her mother's business sense. By the time she was 12, she was essentially running the ranch accounts and had reorganized the whole system to be more efficient. She had her mother's sharp mind for numbers and her father's stubborn determination, a combination that served her well. When Felicity was 40, she and Wade celebrated 12 years of marriage with a renewal of their vows. The whole community turned out for the celebration, held at the ranch on a perfect June day. The children, now ages 12, 10, and 6, stood up with them as witnesses. The same traveling preacher who had married them originally officiated, remarking that he had never seen a couple more suited to each other. At the celebration afterward, with music and dancing and enough food to feed half the county, Felicity found herself standing with Sarah Hendricks, who had become one of her closest friends over the years. "You look happy," Sarah observed. "Truly happy." "I am," Felicity said simply. "I know it is not fashionable to be this content, but I genuinely love my life. I love my husband, I love my children, I love the ranch and the work we do. There is nowhere else I would rather be." "That is not unfashionable, that is rare," Sarah said. "Most people spend their whole lives chasing happiness, but you and Wade built it together." Later that night, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Wade led Felicity out to the porch where they could look out over the valley in the moonlight. 12 years, he said softly. "Feels like both forever and no time at all." "I know what you mean," Felicity agreed. "Sometimes I still feel like that nervous woman on the stagecoach, and other times it seems like I have always been here with you." Wade pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind in a familiar embrace. "Do you ever regret it? Marrying a stranger, moving to this rough country, working as hard as you do?" "Never," Felicity said firmly. "Not for one single moment. You gave me a life when I thought I had none left. You gave me purpose and partnership and love. How could I regret that?" "I am the one who should be grateful," Wade said. "You took a chance on a rancher who did not know the first thing about how to properly court a woman. You built this place with me, made it a real home instead of just a house. You gave me children and love and a partnership I never dared to dream of." They stood together in the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other completely. The night air was cool and carried the scent of sage and the sound of the creek running through the valley. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and the horses in the corrals shifted and snuffled in their sleep. "What do you think the future holds for us?" Felicity asked. Wade considered the question. "More of the same, I hope, watching our children grow and find their own paths. Building the ranch bigger and better. Growing old together right here in this valley." He turned her in his arms so he could see her face in the moonlight. "I want to sit on this porch with you when we are old and gray, watching our grandchildren play, remembering all the years we had together." "That sounds perfect," Felicity said. "Absolutely perfect." The years continued to unfold in their steady rhythm. Victor graduated from the academy and came home to work the ranch full-time. At 20, he married a sweet-natured girl named Mary from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on the far side of the Triple V property. Their first child, a daughter they named Felicity after her grandmother, was born 2 years later, making Wade and Felicity grandparents for the first time. Helen graduated from medical college and opened a practice in Aurora, becoming the first female doctor in the region. She faced resistance and prejudice from some quarters, but her skill and dedication won over most doubters. She married a fellow doctor, a kind man named Robert who shared her passion for medicine, and together they built a small hospital that served the growing community. Emma surprised them all by falling in love with the Basque shepherd they had hired years ago to manage their sheep flock. Miguel Santos was 10 years her senior, and some in the community raised eyebrows at the match. But Wade and Felicity, who had built their own life on defying conventional expectations, gave their blessing. Miguel and Emma made the sheep operation into a highly profitable enterprise and had 3 children who were equally comfortable speaking English and Spanish. As Felicity approached 50, she looked around at the life she and Wade had built and felt profound gratitude. The ranch now covered over 1,000 acres, employed a dozen people year-round, and was respected throughout the region. Their 3 children were healthy, happy, and pursuing their own dreams while staying connected to the family. The grandchildren were beginning to arrive, filling the ranch with new life and laughter. But more than the material success, What filled Felicity with satisfaction was the quality of the life they had created. Wade had kept every promise he made that first day in Aurora. He had treated her as a true partner, valued her opinions, shared his life with her completely. They had built something together that was greater than either of them could have achieved alone. One autumn day, when the cottonwoods were brilliant gold and the air held the first hint of winter, Felicity and Wade rode up to their favorite spot on the high meadow. They were both older now, with threads of gray in their hair and lines earned by years of laughter and sun and hard work. But they were still strong, still vital, still deeply in love. They sat on the boulder looking out over the valley, holding hands the way they had for more than 20 years. The house below was larger now, with additions and improvements, surrounded by gardens and outbuildings. They could see Victor's house in the distance, smoke rising from its chimney. Horses dotted the pastures, and the sheep flock moved like a white cloud across one of the far hillsides. "You remember what I told you that first day?" Wade asked. "About you being exactly the age I had been waiting for." "I remember everything about that day," Felicity said. "It was the beginning of my real life." "Mine too," Wade said. "Before you, I was just surviving, just working. You made me understand what it meant to truly live, to share life with someone else, to build something meaningful together." Felicity leaned her head against his shoulder, breathing in the mountain air and the scent of the sage that grew all around them. "I was so angry when Samuel Jenkins rejected me, so hurt and humiliated. But if he had not turned me away, I never would have met you. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best ones." "That fellow did us both a favor," Wade agreed with a laugh. "Though I doubt he sees it that way. Last I heard, he was on his third wife and still complaining about his life." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching an eagle soar on the thermal currents above the valley. Finally, Wade spoke again. "I want you to know, Felicity, that these years with you have been the best of my life. Every single day with you has been a gift. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I loved you plenty then." Felicity felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you too, Wade. You saw me when I thought I was invisible. You valued me when I thought I had no value. You gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. I am so grateful that you approached me that day, grateful that you looked past what everyone else saw and recognized what we could be together." They kissed, sweet and tender and filled with the depth of love that comes from building a life together through good times and hard times, through joy and sorrow, through all the thousand small moments that make up a marriage. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose and purple, they mounted their horses and rode back down to the ranch. Smoke rose from the chimney where Emma had promised to have dinner ready for them. They could see Miguel coming in from the far pasture with the sheep, and one of the hands was bringing the horses in for the night. Everything was as it should be. Everything was right with the world. That night, lying in their bed with Wade's arm around her, Felicity thought about the woman she had been at 28, sitting on that bench in Aurora with her carpetbag and her broken dreams. That woman had thought her life was over, that she was too old for love or happiness or new beginnings. But that woman had been wrong, because at 28, Felicity had been exactly the right age to meet Wade Vaughn. She had been old enough to know what mattered, young enough to embrace adventure, experienced enough to recognize a good man when she met one, and wise enough to take a chance on something that seemed too good to be true. She had been, as Wade said, exactly the age he had been waiting for. And in finding him, she had found herself as well. The years continued to pass gently. Wade and Felicity grew old together just as he had promised, sitting on their porch watching grandchildren play, sharing stories of their years together, still holding hands the way they had from the very beginning. The ranch passed to Victor and then to his children, but Wade and Felicity remained at its heart, the foundation upon which everything else was built. When Felicity was 72 and Wade was 76, they celebrated their 44th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The house rang with laughter and love, and at the end of the day, when everyone had gone home, they sat together on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains that had been the backdrop to their entire life together. 44 years, Wade said softly. Not long enough. Will never be long enough. Then we will have to make the most of whatever time we have left, Felicity said, just like we have made the most of every day we have had together. That night they fell asleep in each other's arms, the way they had for more than 40 years. And when Wade passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 81, Felicity mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had had a full life together, a good life, a life built on respect and partnership and abiding love. Felicity lived another 5 years after Wade died, surrounded by family and by the ranch that they had built together. She spent her days puttering in the garden, teaching the great-grandchildren to read, and sitting on the porch looking out over the valley that had been her home for over 5 decades. When she passed at the age of 82, peacefully in her sleep just like her beloved Wade, the entire community turned out for her funeral. 3 generations of Vaughns gathered to say goodbye to the woman who had been the heart of the Triple V, the mail-order bride who had been rejected for being too old, until a wise man recognized her true value. They buried her next to Wade on a hillside overlooking the valley, under a cottonwood tree that turned gold every autumn. On the headstone, their children had inscribed both their names and a simple phrase that captured the essence of their marriage. Exactly what we were waiting for. And in the years that followed, their story became part of the family lore, told and retold to each new generation. The story of how their grandmother Felicity had come to Aurora thinking her life was over, only to find it was just beginning. The story of how their grandfather Wade had looked past society's prejudices to see the value in a woman others dismissed. The story of 2 people who built a life together based on respect and partnership and love. It was a story of second chances and new beginnings, of recognizing worth when others could not see it, of building something lasting and good. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple, the kind that reminds us that it is never too late to find happiness, never too late to begin again, and never too late to find someone who looks at you and says, "You are exactly what I have been waiting for." The Triple V Ranch prospered for generations, but the greatest legacy Wade and Felicity left was not the land or the buildings or the herds. It was the example of their marriage, a testament to what 2 people can build when they see each other clearly, value each other completely, and commit to building a life together with honesty, respect, and enduring love. And sometimes, on quiet autumn evenings when the cottonwoods turned gold and the mountains glowed in the setting sun, the family swore they could feel the presence of Wade and Felicity still there on the land they had loved, still holding hands, still looking out over the valley, still exactly what each other had been waiting for, even beyond death, even into eternity.